let's level up. Want to be friends. Do you guys want to be my friend? Nod yes. Okay, cool. Thank goodness. So what Lauren brought up a week or two ago about, how do I influence my friends and not be so influenced by them? We deal with people pleasing, many of us into adulthood, but even especially at the teenage area. I think she's 15. A lot of you guys are around that age, 14, 15, 16. The desire to people please is at such a high, right? And much more than even us, because you want people to like you. You want to feel like you're part of the tribe. You feel like you want to be accepted. You want that approval. I can say from experience, it lasted for me for years after high school. I did a final project actually, in one of my first years in Bible college, that asked you to tackle one of like your worst sins that's just festering, that's just it's keeping with you. And one of mine was being a yes man and just being a people pleaser and kind of bending my will to the opinions of others and wanting people to approve me and affirm me. And it became so bad that it was really sin, because I was idolizing. I was giving my desires up. I was giving my desires and my calling up, not to God, but to the opinions of others. And so I went through this book called You Can Change. If you want to do that, it's a great practice and project this summer. I mean, it's something you want to definitely give a few months to. And so it'd be a deep dive. But I can say that helped me spending 2 or 3 months really working on this, praying through this, and doing the practices and workshops like this, to develop an ability to say no and not just yes to everybody, right? And to start to bend my to not bend my will, but to humble myself and yield my will to God's will, and start to hold his opinion of me higher than anybody else. And then friendships were so much sweeter because I wasn't like trying to buy friendships. It wasn't a transaction. It was actually me knowing who I am with God, knowing who created me and who I'm created for, to be with him. And then in that kind of freedom and liberty of becoming the person God created me to be and stepping more and more into that, I could have sweeter friendships because they weren't a transaction. They were the relationships that are sweet and fulfilling that God means for us. But that's so hard to figure out and jump into when you're 14, 15, 16 years old. Your emotions are so much higher. You only needed the approval of your parents as a little kid, right? And then you step into these younger teenage years, middle teenage years, and now you're trying to exit just the immediate family and also gain the approval of the broader family, like the more and more people that God has created, that you're going to go to school with, that you're going to go to band with, that you're going to go play sports with, and all of the stuff that we experience in our culture. In Avon, Ohio and surrounding areas, like you're going to try and gain the approval of these people, and you don't know how. You've spent years only gaining the approval of parents, and now you know how to do that. Maybe, unless you're a big old rebel. But now you're trying to gain the approval of all these people your age who have just done the same thing. They've only been gaining the approval of immediate family. So we don't really know how to do it. That's the root of the issue, right? You're questioning, how do I talk to my friends about Jesus? Because I want to love Jesus and I want my friends to love Jesus with me. And how do I influence them toward Jesus and not be so influenced? Well, the real big thing is the life stage that you're at is the main thing that we have to self-assess. You have to realize before you take any steps forward. All right, I want to hear from some students here. Definitely some leaders too, but I want to get some students involved here. Not a hard question. why do we act certain ways to try and make sure that we stay friends with some people?
I think we're very naturally wired towards community, and part of that is fitting in, and an unhealthy side of that is blending in. And I think um, when we feel that that is being attacked or being threatened in certain ways, our instinct is to act a certain way, or do certain things or say certain things that allow us to continue being part of that community, whether it's a community we should be in or not. And then that's where it gets important with your relationship with Christ, is figuring out, are the friends you're with part of a community you want to continue being a part of? Um, and that's a really important and often really scary question too.
Yeah, man, thank you. That's a really good point and perspective.
I think a lot of it is like at this age, a lot of things revolve around just trying to fit in and kind of fall into your group of people, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And by trying to act a certain way around some people, you kind of tend to feel like maybe you're more secure around them, or you're more wanted in that group.
Yeah. Like, nobody wants to be that guy. Like, nobody wants to be the guy that stands out, because, like, it's like this fear that if you're that guy, people aren't going to like you. And it's really important. I've noticed it's really important in this day and age that people, like, have, like, this compulsive need for everybody to like them. And it just doesn't work that way.
Did you even say in this day and age, Noah?
Yes.
Why do you think it's right now for your generation so much higher than maybe some previous?
I think that a big contributor to that is social media. I think that really plays into everybody wanting to have, like, this image of, like, look how great I am, look at, like, the following I have. I think that social media fuels our, like, need to be liked. Like, it's so important for some reason to a lot of people to have, like, a big following on social media. And I don't know if that is because of our need to be liked, or if that's what fuels our need to be liked, but I think it's one or the other.
So I've been curious about that lately, because there's been studies in the past few years, a few years ago, I should say, that were saying, like, if you're using social media more than other people, you're more likely to have depression or anxiety because of that whole, like, dopamine injection. Pretty much, you are feeling kind of an addictive sense. You're getting that hit of dopamine, and you feel good when you get that high from somebody, when you send out 10 texts to friends and get one back to say hi and start a conversation, or all those notifications, like you said, are following. You get notified that somebody just followed you or commented. It feels good. But now we're seeing some tests that are like, oh, social media isn't as bad as we thought. It's not tied to depression and anxiety as much. And I don't know, I need some students to share more about that experience with me, how they feel with social media, because now people are saying, like, oh, social media wasn't as bad as we thought, and people are actually engaging more in developing communities, and are kind of engaging with each other in a healthy way more than we thought. Is that untrue, in your guys' perspective, from what you guys feel with social media around you?
I think it depends. I think that social media in the right context is a good thing. I think it helps bring people closer together. But it's like too much of it is not a good thing, because at that point you start, like, I'm going to use Instagram as an example. A lot of people will only post on Instagram, like, the highlights of their life. And other people look at that and think, oh, I wish that my life was this good, because they think, oh, this is what normal is for them. And that's when comparison starts. And comparison, I think, is where it starts really pushing the depression and stuff. But if you're just using it, like, very recreationally, and you're, like, just using it to be closer to other people, then I think that at that point that's where it's not a problem.
Okay. And we're going to dive more into social media in a week or two on our Zoom group, because that was also brought up. So I want to go a little deeper in that. I want to go all over social media today, but man, I just have a lot of curiosity with it, because like I think my generation does compare themselves to their peers now on social media a lot more, because now they're at the place where it's like you have a certain job and career, and how successful are since high school, right? So I'm about 10 years removed from high school, but are students in middle school, high school right now comparing their lives to each other, like how many friends they're hanging out with and what kind of things they're doing out in the world? And that does make you feel like, oh man, I want that.
Yeah, I mean, with social media, like you see personally, I see a lot of my friends going on like vacations to like other places like Hawaii and right now, Hearts, the senior class, they're all in North Carolina right now. I'm just using vacations as an example, but like then there would be the people that like don't really have the opportunities to go on vacations like that, who like might feel that their life isn't as good because they don't get to go to North Carolina or stuff like that. That's just an example that I could think of off the top of my head, but it's stuff as small as that. Like I wish that I could do that instead of be stuck in Ohio. It's that type of stuff I think that is causing like comparison, and again, comparison is a thief of joy.
Whoa, that'll be the title of this message right there. Comparison is the thief of joy. What's the deal? That's really good, man. What's the deal with these spam accounts that you kids are doing?
Spam accounts are like, you have your main account and then you have your spam account.
Right.
And your spam account is where it's just like a dump of like it's the less serious account you have, I guess, where you just post random pictures on that. Your main account is, at least I don't know how other people do it, but most people from what I've found, their main account has like they're really good pictures on it.
Right. You curate your really good photos and your really good stories on that main Instagram account.
Exactly.
But like, what's the point of the spam one with the rando weird pictures?
Just to mess around, I guess.
Okay. It's just an outlet for strange creativity.
I guess. Yeah, I guess that's one way you can put it.
All right. Well, this will all lead us into the social media workshop really well. Judah, was that you raising your hand a lot?
It was, yeah. It's slightly less related now. Slightly less related now, but I think kind of related to what you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. Two things popped into my head when you talked about like, is social media really the cause of us wanting to be like other people and feel jealousy for other people? And the first thing is that there's this phrase that a lot of adults use. We call it keeping up with the Joneses, if anyone's ever heard that phrase. And that phrase originated from like the 1950s, you know, the feeling of wanting to have the car that your neighbor has and wanting to have as nice a house as your neighbor has. And there's just like one historical fact that always pops into my head, that like white wedding dresses and white wedding cakes originated because people saw photographs of Queen Victoria in a white wedding gown, and they wanted to be like Queen Victoria. And that was in the 1890s or something like that, you know. And the Bible, one of the 10 commandments is about covenanting, you know. And so as far back in human history as we can go, all the way back to our texts in the Bible, there's the idea of covenanting neighbors and of wanting to be like other people. And see, I think social media is an extension of that, but something you talk about a lot, and we leaders talk about a lot, is how social media can also be a tool for, you know, instead of using it as like a passive thing, actively getting involved in it or becoming a creator, can really give you the space and the opportunity to kind of turn those ideas on their heads instead of using it to like let those bad thoughts fester. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that's really, really good. Anybody have any other thoughts or their feeling what Noah shared or what Judah shared before I just move on too fast? Okay, Eliana.
So I know that some people, like, it's kind of like thinking about who you follow and stuff, like that can kind of control, like some people, they want to like be able to say, oh yeah, I'm depressed, and like some people, they just want like, and they follow people that are like that, and then that can lead to like just seeing that other people are like that, and like you people, like they feed off of each other, and but then there's people that like they know like maybe they are depressed and they want to turn that around. They can start like following people that are, Christians and like good, like upbeat people that are like encouraging, and like they see that in the morning, like just a random quote that can make them happy, and I feel like that's where social media can be a good thing, because like, social media can help you, I say, in that case, but some people, they can make themselves worse by like their own decisions in what they see. So
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, misery loves company. So that's really good that you bring that up, because I feel like people also join in community based on that same interest. I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling deflated. I don't feel good about myself. And sometimes, Eliana, it's not so easy to just choose like, well, I'm going to hang out with these people that are more positive and joyful. It actually feels good to feel angry.
mm-hmm.
It feels good to feel anger, to feel until depression sets in. There's kind of that shot of dopamine again from feeling anger. And so you get that little by little by little. And then like you said, you start to feed onto other people who are sharing that same thing, right? You're building community on a very, very toxic foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So you're definitely right there. But yeah, we're all trying to build a community. What we're all getting at here, why do we act certain ways to try and make sure we are friends with some people? It's for approval. It's either for the approval, like Ethan said, of trying to make sure, Ethan and Noah said it, we're not trying to be that guy that's left out, right? And you said, I want the approval of others. So you haven't felt the approval of anybody else. And then all of a sudden, like there's these other people that share, oh yeah, I don't feel well. I don't feel good about myself. I'm depressed. You feel almost a toxic approval, right? Yeah. So we need to have a good self-assessment of that before we even move any further in trying to help other people follow Jesus with us. So we're looking for approval in this adolescent time, the high stress time of adolescence. Like I said earlier, as a little kid, you only crave your parents' approval. That's how it's supposed to be. And then as a teen, you move from your immediate family, so to speak, to the broader tribe when you're in school and such. And then you're trying to gain the approval there, but you haven't really learned how to do it. And this is why I spent so much time in social media, because my generation was addicted to social media, and now it's this next generation, you guys, who are used to it, right? If I had my phone this entire time and I'm just trying to talk to you and I'm not really paying attention and I'm on that, you already feel like you're not the most important thing to me, right? That wasn't the way it was before phones were invented. The smartphone was invented in 2007, right? When you were in a meeting, you talked to people, you made conversation, you made friendships, you made deep, lasting, meaningful relationships and friendships. And now, not saying the phone is like the cause, but we've let it become this distraction, and things like the smartphone that make it too difficult for us, and especially your generation who's just so used to the world with it being natural and normal, where you don't know how to make deep, meaningful relationships, right? And so this is what Simon Sinek says. If you're writing notes down with me here, or you're using that worksheet, Simon Sinek says that this generation has a systemic impatience. And this isn't a knock on you guys or anything. This is just the reality. You guys have a systemic impatience. That means you're living in a system where it doesn't mean that you are immature, doesn't mean you're not hard workers, that you have a terrible work ethic, that you don't care about anything, that you have teenage angst. I believe a lot of you guys are super hard workers. Most of you guys in here are way more accomplished musicians than I could have ever become, and you're only like 15, 16 years old. Like, you've worked hard at some things. Some of you are very brilliant young people. I don't think that you have a problem there, but you want everything now, right? Again, it's not a knock against you. It's just the way it is in our world right now. And so it halts us. It makes it so that we cannot have an easy path toward making deep, meaningful friendships and relationships. Doesn't make it impossible yet. Hopefully it doesn't get worse, but it makes it very, very difficult because you're not learning the skills to make friends and to develop the skills to find fulfillment. I mean, speaking of music, Eliana, how long did it take you to learn the violin to become as good as you are now?
I mean, it's been 4 years since I started, but
4 years, right? 4 years. Cam, how long did it take you to learn the cello?
I only play the violin. I don't play the cello.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
It's fine.
Annabelle plays the cello.
Who is it? Is that
Annabelle
Sarah?
plays the cello.
Annabelle. Okay. How long did it take you, Cam? 4 years as well to learn the violin?
Oh, yeah. Same time.
4 years. Ethan, how long did it take you to learn the drums?
I'm not really sure because I've been playing since I was like 3.
Okay.
How
old are you now?
14.
Oh my goodness. See? 3 years old to 14 years old.
And I'm still learning.
Oh yeah, you're all still learning, but you at least know the skill to some degree now, and you're only a young teenager. Noah, how long did it take you to learn the guitar?
I've been playing since I was 9, so I'm 16 now, so several years. And I am not even that great compared to a lot of people, so it takes time.
There you go. Lincoln, you've spent, I'm sure, a few years learning guitar.
I've only been playing for a year.
You've been playing a year. Okay. But that's still a whole year of your life. And how old are you?
14.
Only 14. Luke, you play the drums and you run like a whole YouTube channel, right? How long did it take to develop all these skills?
Well, for the drums, it's been like 5 years. And for the YouTube, technically took me a very long time because I had to like get my entire setup.
Yeah.
Before I could really start. So I'd say 13 years to get that going from when I was born till I started when I was 13.
Straight out the womb.
Yep.
Yep. See?
I've been trying for like four years now to get the YouTube thing going as well.
Yeah. Yeah. See, all of these things take time and they're fulfilling. You guys enjoy them. They're like your hobby. You choose to spend time there. But we're so impatient. So social stress sets in with trying to make friendships because we don't want to spend a year, 4 years, 7 years developing really deep, meaningful relationships like we did with our parents maybe, or maybe another family member we've been living with. My wife lived with her grandmother for years. That was her roommate at her house growing up with her parents, her sister, and her grandma lived there. I don't have that close of a relationship with any of my grandmas, but my wife like bawled crying after seeing them for Memorial Day. We spent like 4 days with them all. I'm like, all right, let's get in the car. I'm ready to go. Because they're my in-laws, you know? I'm like, let's roll out of here. But for her, with her grandma, she's like bawling her eyes out. I don't experience that because I didn't spend the time she did investing in that kind of relationship. But you see how fulfilling it is. It makes you cry when you have to leave them. It's such a stressful time for you right now, trying to figure out how to do that when you've only done it at home, or maybe not much even at home at all, depending on your background. For example, we had a student who graduated, Students at Hope last year, graduated from North Ridgeville, brilliant young girl. And she had such a high GPA and had all the qualifications to get into a NASA internship with Kevin Melcher, who goes to our church. He was going to expedite the process to get her into this NASA internship. And she had such social stress and anxiety, great grades, great young girl, such social stress and anxiety. She didn't want to talk to Kevin Melcher. Could not talk to an adult about this process. Like, wanted me to do the whole thing. And I'm like, I'm not going to work at NASA. You are. Like, you got to go do it. You know. So you see how that plays out. Even an 18-year-old who has all this pedigree, all these qualifications, this generation is struggling to talk with people and move forward in relationships and friendships and networking with people. So if that's the case, it's going to be tough for us to move forward and teach people how to follow Jesus. So we got to hit this first. And self-assessing this is a cheat code. When you know this about yourself, when you know this about your generation, when you know the stress and anxiety you're feeling and why, then you're able to take a step out of it and start to move forward. Why are we so nervous about people knowing that we like Jesus?
A lot of people these days aren't really a fan of Christianity because I think it mainly stems from like the people in the subways that would yell at you that you're going to hell if you don't believe in Jesus, and all of the really judgmental Christians. I think that's a lot of where the disrespect for Christianity comes from. And even though you don't see as much of that these days, it's still there that people aren't really a fan of Christianity because, I mean, they don't like being told what to do. They don't like being judged and all of that stuff. So their solution is just not like Christians. And we're afraid that if we tell people that we love Jesus, then that's how people will think of us. So they'll think, oh, he's just a judgmental Jesus freak. And that thought, yeah.
Right. Great thoughts, man. So we don't want to be associated with the judgmental pocket of Christians. Gotcha. What do you guys think? Thanks, Noah. Why are we nervous about people knowing that we like Jesus?
I think one reason know about Jesus themselves, even if they are Christians. I mean, if you look at Neil did a Easter sermon 2 years ago where he talked about how from research, a lot of Christians don't even go to church more than once or twice a week or a month, and they don't even read their Bibles more than a handful of times in a year. So they may have strong feelings about it, but they themselves don't know that much about it. And they could also be scared of being rejected by people or losing friendships.
There's not a strong enough confidence in your relationship with Jesus yourself to where, like, that's too shaky. If somebody doesn't like me, well, I can just toss this whole Christian thing that I'm about out the window because I'm not that hardcore about it. Definitely. Luke, were you about to jump in there too, bud?
Yeah, I was gonna
Okay.
say that one reason I think is probably like kind of what you guys have been saying with like crucifixion, where we as Christians might be scared that if we tell people we're gonna get crucified for our religion, and other people are scared to become Christians because they're gonna get crucified for their religion. So, that's probably one reason why nobody wants to say anything about Jesus these days. Because Christians are just hated, kind of like what Noah said, because people will be on the subway screaming that if you don't believe in Jesus, you're gonna go to hell. So people don't want to become Christians because they're scared of crucifixion. We don't want to say anything about it because they're scared of crucifixion.
It's uncomfortable, huh?
Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I think something that I experienced whenever I first became a Christian as like a teenager is that I was nervous for people to know that I like Jesus, because Jesus isn't someone who is a part of fitting in. So knowing Jesus or liking Jesus wasn't a way to fit in at all. In fact, you'd stand out completely. And so for me, like whenever I was a teenager and just getting to know Jesus, that was my biggest thing.
So why do we act certain ways to try and make sure we are friends with some people? Because we want to fit in. Like Kayla just said, Jesus isn't about fitting in. So we want to follow Jesus, but we also want to fit in with people, and those things conflict. They don't go together for us, right? So we're nervous to let anybody know. And Jesus says this to his disciples: if we're going to follow him, this is what he's about. John 15:18-19. If the world hates you, understand that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. However, because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of it, the world hates you. So in other words, to use that tribe language again, we're supposed to leave the immediate family. As Simon Sinek says, we're supposed to enter the broader tribe and learn to depend on and fit in with other people and have meaningful relationships. Part of that's true, but a bigger truth is that Jesus has called us to his tribe. And it looks a lot different than the world and fitting in. Don't conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? So if we follow Jesus, there's going to be some discomfort. But Jesus also says, or the Bible also says that Jesus grew in favor with God and man. So there's times where we might have favor with people. There's times where we might be respected. There's times where we might be embraced and fit in with people. But there's also times when the world butts up against the desires of Jesus and the tribe that we're actually called to. We're not of this world. So there's going to be times where we might be hated. But understand, Jesus says, he's even giving us approval and affirmation here. He's saying, look, don't take it personally. It's because of me. They hated me that I didn't fit in, as Kayla just said. And if we don't feel like we're fitting in, if we feel like our whole identity and affirmation is centered on other people's opinions, then we need to realize that Jesus says this to us in Matthew 5. In the Sermon on the Mount, he says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. That's kind of the language that Luke was just using, right? Love your enemies. Don't feel like people that are rejecting you are people that you have to go earn and buy the trust and relationship of, like I felt I was, what I shared from the very beginning here. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Think about them. Lift them up to God. That's not a practice that we do every day. It's not something I do every day, but it's something that is going to make us look more like Jesus, help us follow him. And it's going to be appreciated by some. Maybe not the whole world, but it's going to be appreciated and it's going to be admired by some. It's not all bad. The world doesn't just hate you. Proverbs 3 tells us, my son, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands, for they will bring you many days, a full life and well-being. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Tie them around your neck like a necklace. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and high regard with God and people. So like I was saying, both can be true. There will be times when the world seems to go, whoa, you don't fit in with us. This whole following Jesus thing, we're going this way, you're going that way. There can be conflict. But also in keeping faithful and keeping loyal to the tribe that Jesus calls us to with him makes it so that we find favor with God and with people at other times. Right? It's like we said last week. This is the same writer who wrote Proverbs, who wrote Ecclesiastes, who said there's a time and place for everything. But we have to stay faithful and loyal. We can't just be blown around by the opinions of others and what they want us to be. We have to be the people that Jesus created us to be. We've even seen in this youth group friendships strengthen, and we've seen people bring friends into this youth group. Some of them are here. Lincoln, you were invited by Cam and Eliana and Annabelle and Sarah in that group, right?
Yep.
And so was Jeremy, who we're missing tonight. You guys brought in Jeremy. We've had some of this already in a new young youth group where you guys have already gone, you know what? I want to invite my friends to this, to be a part of this with me. That's a hard, uncomfortable, strange thing to do, especially when we have that question on our minds, what if they don't like me because I like Jesus? Right? So some of you have already gone out and done some of this. It's great stuff. We have to keep doing this if people are going to hear about who Jesus is and start to follow him with us. When I was a Christian for a couple years in, I really loved this whole idea of like, okay, I have to be faithful and loyal, and there's going to be some people that come to Jesus with me, and there's going to be some people who don't like me, and I've got to just understand that, because I wanted to follow Jesus and practice what he was about, because I love Jesus more than anything. Right? He's the answer to life. So I wanted to start living life in a way that kind of helped me experience what he was talking about in the scriptures. And I worked at Outback Steakhouse when I was 20 or so. I was a younger Christian at the time. I just became a Christian like 18 or 19. And there was this kid who was doing a bunch of drugs, and he was a busboy, and he was like, he wanted to be a rock star and just like totally waste his life away. But we became friends in Outback. I'm like the Christian dude who's going to church, like helping with the youth group. And this kid's like getting part of his sleeve done every week with his busboy money and doing all the drugs he can get. And he didn't have a car or anything. And his brother was like super clean cut, very academic, getting good grades, going to go to Ohio State, like the complete opposite personality to this kid who was the little brother. And he worked at Outback Steakhouse with us, and he wouldn't take him home. He like hated him that much. He wouldn't take him home. He was being completely rejected by his immediate tribe. Wouldn't allow him to ride in the car with him. Just didn't want any part of him. So I start driving him home, and we start having conversations. And he starts asking me why I'm about what I'm about, and why I believe what I believe, and why I would ever think Jesus is the answer. And I just started explaining my story and how like crazy it was that Jesus brought me into his tribe. And he started to go, okay, I kind of get it. Like I that's really cool for you. Like, I don't think I'm into that right now, but I can see why that change happened in your life. Like that was an epic change. And you feel like your life matters with God, right? And he didn't fully get it at first, but I fully explained my story and my testimony and what happened in my life a year or two prior. And we kept on just becoming friends. And before those car rides happened, and before I shared the story, I was already seeing him. I was already calling him by name. I was already Just figuring out what he was about and what he was interested in. Those were the steps first before we got in the car and before the relationship went deeper. So anyway, long story short, years later, I move out of that area. I'm working in Ashland, Ohio at a church. And this kid, on like one of the first days I started hanging out with this youth group in Ashland, Ohio, gets me on Facebook Messenger out of nowhere. This would have been 4 or 5 years later. Comes to me and is like, hey, man, I just want you to know I went off to college. And I remember working at Outback Steakhouse with you. And you need to know that, like, now I love Jesus and I love the Word of God. And I've started going to this H2O church on the Kent State campus. And now I'm, like, totally involved. And, like, all I really had was one conversation about Jesus with him. And the rest of it was just becoming his friend. And then years later, that's when God's timing was to bring him into his tribe. Right? So I could have been like, whoa, I'm too nervous for this. And I was kind of nervous, but I could have said, it's too nerve-wracking. I don't want to do it. But that one conversation I remember in the car years later made him want to come out to me, find me on Facebook, get me on Facebook Messenger, and tell me the whole story of what happened. That is the kind of stuff we want to see with our friendships. And look at how Jesus is with this guy. Kind of a similar thing, but this story is, we were just talking about it before we got on to Zoom. This is Kayla's favorite Bible story, and this is probably in the top 3 for me. And this really helped me, I think, even with that conversation with that young man back in the day. How Jesus operates, how Jesus interacts with the people that we think should be cut off are the worst. It says Jesus and Zacchaeus in Luke 19. Jesus enters Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector. And he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able because of the crowd, since he was a short man. So running ahead, he climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it is necessary for me to stay at your house. Look at that for a second. Zacchaeus has already watched Jesus' life and gone, there's something about that makes me want that kind of life. He's already watched him from afar and gone, something about him that I want, something that I need. I don't know exactly what yet, but I want to discover it. And at just the right time, Jesus knows him and calls him by name out of the tree, says, we're going to hang out, right? So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain. He's gone to stay with a sinful man. See that? There's the rejection already from the world. But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much. He's a tax collector. He rips people off all the time. He doesn't give them the money back that they're owed, and he takes some for himself. Gives some to the government, but takes some into his own pocket. Is literally stealing from fellow men and women around his same country people, his same people that he lives around, his same city, his same town. He's one of the worst of the worst. He says, look, I'm going to give it all back and then more. And Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. Here we go. There's one more set of verses I want off of the Zacchaeus verse. So Jesus, you see, is already being rejected by some of these other people as he's going to eat with this person who they hate. They want nothing to do with him. And he turns his life around to start following and living with Jesus. And not only that, he's finding favor again with God and man. He's going back and loving people created in the image of God and giving back to them. And this is how Jesus, again, models being among people who we would be nervous to hang out around in general, definitely nervous to share that we like Jesus and we're about his life. But he's the one who goes to them in stories like this. Matthew 9, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. While he was reclining at the table in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came to eat with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" People that rip other people off and don't care about others. Verse 12, now when he heard this, he said, "It is not those who are well who need a doctor, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners." So we think we're going to be rejected by people, and we're not going to be able to influence them because they're already going to have this thing about Jesus, right? And that they're going to want to live their own life. They don't want God to tell them what to do. They don't want to feel judged. That's what I've heard a lot of you guys say tonight. But in reality, Jesus is the one who goes to the people who have been living the way they want to live and ripping other people off and making friends out of them, saying, "You want to be friends with me," right? So I'll bring this thing to a close. Ultimately, here's the first 3 steps toward Jesus, and he models these in both of those past passages we just looked at, in Zacchaeus and Matthew. This is the only 3 words you need to keep in your mind when you're trying to ask somebody to be friends with you and follow Jesus with you, to teach somebody else about Jesus, okay? See them. Jesus saw Zacchaeus in the tree and went toward him, right? Know them. He calls him by name. It says, "Come here and hang out with me." And love them. It was a sign of love to go share a meal at somebody's table in their home with them. That's what we're seeing here. See them, know them, love them. Don't make it so stressful in your mind. Don't think too hard and long about, oh my goodness, this is going to be super difficult to remember the whole gospel and remember how to present it well to my friends. I'm going to screw it up. No. See them, know them, to address them by name even. It helps somebody feel so much more loved and accepted when you just call them by name. And love them. Share meals with them. Drive them if they need, whatever that looks like in your life right now. Practice those things with these people and move toward them. See them, know them, love them. All right, so that's how we're going to level up. Any questions, comments, queries, mutinies?
I have a comment.
Okay.
So I think it's super important, the last 3 steps for sure, but I also think it's super important to note that that doesn't always work. As much as you want it to, and you can have the purest intentions and just want to serve and love on people, but some people will not accept it. When we started getting super serious about following Jesus and living our lives the way the Bible tells us to, my best friend wanted nothing to do with it. This is a girl I went to high school with. We were best friends. She knew everything. We went through college together. We graduated together. We went through the loss of my mom together, and she walked away, wanted nothing to do with it. So the fact that, Jesus says there are going to be people who hate you, and it's true, so expect it. And I think that that's important to note, even though it's not fun and it's not a happy part of the Bible, but it's part of the process. And out of that, we've come to find everybody at Hope. We've made friends with the other leaders in this group. We've made friends with other members of the church. And those relationships that are built on following Jesus and loving Christ and living in a biblical way has been so much more beneficial than what I thought that friendship that I lost was. that's just something that I wanted to make sure that I shared and that we kind of keep in mind, because you think these people from high school and these people from middle school, like, they're going to be there the rest of your life and they're your, go-to people. And they might be, but you can also grow in your walk, in your faith, and they might not want to be part of that. So that's just something I've experienced, and I wanted to make sure was, it's a possibility.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's why you guys are here. Totally meant to bring that up. That is, and it's better that it came from you and those experiences, because it sounds like you have more than me there. This whole see them, know them, love them is not a formula to say, okay, now they're going to love Jesus. That's definitely not it. Jesus knew exactly the timing of those people in those verses, like Zacchaeus, when they were going to come to know him. I don't know that. Abby doesn't know that. We don't know that. But we have to remain loyal and faithful to teaching people about who he is. And that's why that verse was there as well. There are going to be parts of the world that hate the fact that we follow Jesus. But it is so sweet as well when stories arise in your life where people start to follow Jesus with you. But yeah, you can't have both. That's for sure. It's definitely part of the process. Like Abby said, I love that. Yeah, it's definitely not a formula. But it is 3 words to remember to take the pressure off, because just like those verses show, it's Jesus ultimately who's going to work on the heart. It's Jesus ultimately who knows the timing of when that person's going to come to know him, if they do. All right, so everybody go start a fire in your backyard or play volleyball outside or something in the last hour or two that's beautiful outside, and think of us as you do that. And next week we're back on again at 7, all right? Tell your people. Tell yo people. Love you.